Hello, and we are back, this time with a Season 5 breakdown. Some of you might be scratching your heads at this development, but I have planned for a while now to make Worst of Thrones episodes alongside the Best of Thrones episodes. And since pretty much all of the best episodes are in the first 4 seasons and all the worst episodes are in the last 4 seasons, figured I could kind of treat it like 2 different series. We can have Game of Thrones proper, and then we can have Dragon Show. Tommen ascended, Tyrion took the fall, he kills Tywin, Jaime and Varys spring him out. In this version of events, there's no Tysha reveal. We had the awesome Mountain and Viper fight, which we all know how that ended. We had Daenerys chaining her dragons. Quick reminder that Cersei is not comfortable with Myrcella staying in Dorne. It's going to be pretty important going forward, especially now that Oberyn's dead. We had Arya finally part ways with the Hound after a really silly fight between Brienne and the Hound. And she got on a ship and she's headed towards Braavos. Things are gonna get exciting, right? She's headed to the House of Black and White. She's gonna become a faceless man. That sounds awesome, doesn't it? Then we had the best episode, Watchers on the Wall, where we got to see the peak of the Jon Snow storyline. A lot of people are going to say that happens in this season, but don't you worry, we're going to get to Hardhome eventually. And I got a couple things to say about it. Then we got Stannis the Manus showing up at the Wall and absolutely wrecking the Wildlings shit. This is the one part of the season I actually look forward to. Castle Black has like almost a protective bubble around it where a lot of what happens there is just really good. Some of it is as good as anything in the previous seasons. But once like Stannis leaves Castle Black, his brain starts to leak out of his ears like all the other characters. Yeah, that's right. Even Hardhome isn't safe from a whole helping of silly. But between the Jon Snow storyline, a bit of the Stannis storyline, and maybe a good half, maybe more. We'll get more into it. But a lot of the stuff at King's Landing, like there's plenty that works. While the back-to-back bangers end with season 4, there's still some gold to be found in this season. And that's all the recap. So we hop right into the Maggie the Frog prophecy.
If your father he'll never know we're gone. You don't need to be afraid of my father.
A young Cersei traveling through the woods with her friend, and we can see that she was very brave and confident, and that even when she was younger, she was still a little crazy and power hungry from the get-go. This moment where she says, "Oh, you don't need to be afraid of my father finding out," I like that we linger and she just smiles, with the implication being, if he finds out, it's going to be because you ratted us out, and then you got to be afraid of me, not my father. And they make it to this spooky little hut, and they meet the witch.
Get out!
Let's go. No, they said that you were terrifying. You're not terrifying. You're boring.
I should say now, I think this is the only flashback scene in the entire show. Hopefully someone will correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think other than the Bran scenes where they're like straight up visions, this is the only time we have a flashback, which I think is kind of a big bummer, especially considering that Bran is just missing for this entire season, and supposedly he's training with the Three-Eyed Raven. I think that would have been a really cool opportunity to have Bran jumping all over the place, kind of going all throughout time. Because in the books, we have a lot of internal monologues, and we have a lot of memories and dreams and visions. And in the show, we lose all of that. Definitely a missed opportunity.
Everyone wants to know their future until they know their future.
Tell me my future, or I'll have your 2 boring eyes gouged out of your head.
So Cersei threatens her. Would Tywin really care about the witch in the woods? Maybe. But I think what matters is that this is kind of Cersei showing her true colors to the witch. And she's like, oh, you're a little shit, aren't you? She's like, you probably deserve to have your future be read to you.
3 questions you get. You won't like the answers.
Yeah, and Maggie repeatedly warns her to leave. She tells her she doesn't want to really know her future. Everyone wants to know their future until they know it. Even here, when she says you get 3 questions, she throws in, you're not going to like the answers. A lot of Cersei's story in this season, or especially in the book Feast for Crows, a lot of it is about how Cersei brings about so much of her own destruction. And then the other layer to it is the fact that this is a prophecy that dictates a lot of her behavior going forward. If she hadn't been told the prophecy, you have to think, oh, well, maybe a lot of this could have and would have been avoided if she wasn't operating off of so much paranoia. And that is a big part of the takeaway, but I think the other half of it too is that Game of Thrones is constantly just like peppering you with like social commentary. And George does this with almost all of his characters where he actually humanizes them. He says, yeah, this person seems insane to us, but they're also in circumstances that are insane to us. And if you really track their whole life, if you track their history, even if you don't agree with their decisions, it makes sense. And it makes them feel like a real fucking person. So I like that Cersei, one of the most evil and vindictive pieces of shit in the show, even she gets this setup where it's like, oh, was there really any chance for her? The daughter of Tywin. The society she's in is extremely sexist. She internalizes a fuck ton of that. It just has you wondering how quote-unquote normal could Cersei be if she was in a quote-unquote normal environment.
I've been promised to the prince,
You'll never wed the prince. You'll wed the king.
but I will be queen.
And Maggie could have just said, yep, you'll be queen. But then she starts to throw in the doom.
For a time. And comes another to cast you down and take all you hold dear.
So much of what happens in Feast for Crows is just Cersei's paranoia creating a lot of her own problems because she makes a lot of stupid decisions out of fear. And going after the Tyrells is one of those decisions. But here in the show, a lot of Cersei's actions aren't as much paranoia as they are her actually being on to the Tyrells, trying to edge her out of court. So we kind of lose like the biggest element of Feast for Crows, where so much of like Cersei's turmoil is self-inflicted, whereas in the show she's less paranoid and her paranoia is more justified, which that's an angle you can take. But considering where things end in season 6, they really should have started going the madness route as early as they could. It definitely would have benefited them to stay more on book.
Will the king and I have children?
The king will have 20 children, and you will have 3.
That doesn't make sense.
Because here they said 3 instead of 4. They kind of forgot about the first baby, because that first the black-haired beauty, that little boy doesn't exist in the books. So they added him, and then they forgot about him.
That doesn't make sense.
Gold will be their crowns, their shrouds.
They kind of double fucked up by adding the baby and not saying 4 kids. Because in the books, Robert does get Cersei pregnant at one point, but then she gets, I guess, Moon Tea? She just said Jaime took her to a woman to get her cleansed. But in that case, at least for the books, it's important to note that Cersei would have already had 4 children and broken the prophecy if she hadn't aborted that first baby. And that's a very important part of prophecy. This is something George does a lot. But it's the idea that people who make decisions based off of prophecy usually almost always end up screwed over in some way. But it's a really handy way of exploring the agency characters have by putting them in a scenario where they think they're helpless, but then showing that so many of the things that they were trying to avoid were indeed caused by their own actions, which is, again, really cool element of her story, but it's very watered down in the show. It's kind of crazy that we start with this scene, and then it honestly ends up not being that important to her story because it's missing kind of that her going crazy element. It's more her just being stupid, and a lot of characters in season 5 start acting stupid. So it doesn't really feel on theme. It just feels like a happy accident. Oh, and I have to mention now, there's another important element to the prophecy that gets axed in the show, and that's the Valonqar. She says, and when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you. And Valonqar is Valyrian for little brother. And this is supposed to explain a large chunk of Cersei's hatred for Tyrion. And a lot of people theorize, of course, that Jaime is also her little brother. Even though they're twins, in the book, they like deliberately point out that Cersei came out first. Which would definitely be on theme. I would have liked to see that a lot, instead of Jaime abandoning all of his character growth. But the Valonqar bit is just entirely missing. We cut back to present day, and she's arriving at the Sept of Baelor. We can tell from her black dress, the black shawl being worn by the High Septon, even the black Lannister banners, that this is a funeral for Tywin. A special treat for the audience, Charles Dance wearing the googly eyes. This is going to be my new profile picture. Jaime is standing vigil over his father's dead body, but he's feeling very guilty for letting Tyrion out and being somewhat complicit in his father's death.
What he built, it's ours.
It's a really interesting line coming from Jaime, Jaime, who is sworn to the Kingsguard and will inherit no lands. This is more of a Cersei line, really.
They're going to try to take it away. All of it.
They?
All of them out there are enemies.
That right there, that's a Cersei line. Especially following the scene where we show the Maggie the Frog prophecy. This is kind of ass backwards. Jaime is the one who immediately goes into paranoia mode, whereas realistically, it should be Cersei.
They'll set to work on tearing us apart.
They have nothing to do with it.
And this is a pretty notable change too. In the books, Jaime doesn't tell, he might tell Ellen Payne.
He's the enemy. I've been telling you for years. You've been defending him for
This
years.
is exactly what they want.
Also, again, it's so weird that she's not paranoid about the people outside. She's not paranoid about the Tyrells in this moment. She's most worried about Tyrion. Even though of all the things we cut from the prophecy, it was the Valonqar bit.
Now our father is dead. That little monster is out there somewhere drawing breath. Did you set him free? Tyrion may be a monster, but at least...
Yeah, and here Cersei figures out that Jaime let him out. And honestly, her response is pretty fucking tame. She should be utterly furious. A weird change to not really make much of a deal out of. We hop over to Tyrion, and I do like the choice to shoot this from his perspective, peering through the tiny little air holes in the box. I'll try to tone down references to the book going forward. Don't want to be here all fucking day. I also don't remember them all that well, so I'm gonna avoid sharing if I'm sparse on the details myself. But Illyrio is featured pretty heavily at the start of Tyrion's story in Dance with Dragons, and he's actually there to meet Tyrion and like interact with him. But here it's just the name drop. This is a pretty good indicator of things to come. In the books, there's another Targaryen, supposed Targaryen, named Aegon, and Varys and Illyrio, it turns out, have been grooming him to be king. And all the crazy political maneuvering that Varys has been doing so far, it's all been in service of priming the realm for Aegon's ascent. But in this one scene, we established that nope, there's no Illyrio. Jon Connington and his crew are not here. And what's worse is the alternative is kind of embarrassing.
A group of people who saw Robert Baratheon for the disaster he was.
It's a really weird way to frame it, as if most people weren't aware that Robert wasn't a great king. But go on, Varys.
We tried to do what was best for the realm by supporting a Targaryen restoration.
So we got a little quiet there, but he said, we tried to do what was best for the realm by supporting a Targaryen restoration. Why? Dave and Dan, you pieces of shit. As a Varys enjoyer, as a show Varys enjoyer, this is very upsetting, because this is the moment that all of the work up until this point is rendered pointless. It's rendered stupid. Varys, as a person, as a character, just has devolved into a moron with this one fucking line. This guy served under the Mad King, but apparently Robert was too much for him. Robert was what made him decide it's time for me to start scheming and figure out my own claimant for the throne. Maybe if Varys had some kind of ties, some kind of familial connection to the Targaryens or even the Blackfyres, that could make sense. But no, we find out he's entirely altruistic, and yet he's convinced, this fucking bozo is convinced that he needs to put a Targaryen on the throne to save the realm from Robert of all people. And if you thought that was bad, it only gets worse, because apparently this means that he's been planning for quite some time now to throw his lot in with Daenerys, which is a huge fucking gamble, and Varys is not a gambler. He's the opposite of that. He plays it super, super fucking safe. One of the reasons Aegon is perfect as an addition to the story is because it explains a lot of the goofiness with Varys. Not all of it, but a lot of it. But now we have to sit and wonder at what point, because Varys kind of left Dany and Viserys out to dry. The idea that he's been banking on them this whole time is just ridiculous. Yeah, not a fan of this moment. This, again, they could have redeemed it with the Aegon plot point if he's like, oh, Targaryen restoration, as in a kid that I groomed like his whole life. Someone that I've made sure is like focus group tested, cooked in a lab to be the best king. That's a decision that makes sense for show Varys. What doesn't make sense is for him to, at any point in the last 4 seasons, to have decided she's gonna be the one to save the realm from itself. All Dany thinks she knows about Varys is that he tried to have her killed that one time, and yet he puts himself in hyper danger by traveling all the way to her and asking for a fucking job. It's really, really, really silly.
And thus began.
In fact, it's so silly that it kinda makes me wanna. And that right there is the best thing to come out of this episode. So Tyrion's in a pretty reasonable place. He's feeling pretty depressed and hopeless. He's lost everything, everyone. He was betrayed by his father, his girlfriend. Even Varys showed up to the trial to testify against him. I enjoy our brief time with Depresso Tyrion, and I think it fits considering everything that's happened. I just wish he kept better company, because this imposter posing as Varys, he ain't it. Definitely not the safest or most efficient way of getting that statue down, but I can kind of appreciate just the pure spectacle of it, as well as the symbolism, because we'll see right after this that although the slavers have been defeated, they've been removed from power. You know, now the statue is no longer at the top of the pyramid. There's still work to be done. The Harpies may no longer be in the pyramids, but they're in the streets. So we follow this Unsullied soldier into the streets, where he pays for the services of a hua. And a couple characters ask in the show, what would an Unsullied possibly want with a prostitute? And we see in the case of this Unsullied that he just wants to be held. Can't really show anything because tits are out. But aside from tits being out and like his shirt being off, it seems a lot less like romantic or sexual than it does maternal. You know, he gets to be the little spoon while she hums to him, and he just lays there with his eyes closed. And you definitely get the feeling that he's trying to experience something that he's never experienced before, or maybe that he has a very, very distant memory of. Up until this point, this is kind of the most vulnerable state we've ever seen any Unsullied in. It's surprisingly sweet and innocent for a badass slave warrior. And then while he's laying there with his eyes closed, his throat gets cut. We see another man has slipped into the room. And it seems this was coordinated between the prostitute and whoever this masked man is. But this is our first look at the Sons of the Harpy. In the show, the Sons of the Harpy are a full-on organization run by former slave owners, which I'm not going to knock as a decision just by itself. I don't think that's a flawed way to do it. As much as it might frustrate a lot of book readers, I do think the show is wise to trim a lot of fat. Calling it fat, I guess, isn't fair because it does enhance the story. But the show streamlines things quite a bit, and I don't think it's always to the detriment of the story. I think for film and television, there are choices that are made that do translate better to a TV show than they would a book. Because in the book, the Sons of the Harpy and a lot of Meereen is way more complicated. Because what Dany is doing is trying to rule a foreign country that she doesn't fully understand. The Sons of the Harpy are, as of yet in the books, a faceless movement more than an organization. The idea behind them being that, yeah, this might seem like straight up terrorism to an outside observer, but there are large swaths of the people living in this country who want Dany out, who see her as a foreign invader. And in the books, the Sons of the Harpy are supposed to kind of symbolize how hard it is to deal with an enemy force, when in reality your biggest enemy is just the citizens of the country that you're occupying. Which they sort of do. They don't really stick to it, but they're sort of doing it even in this scene where they have the prostitute who seems to just be a local. She's in on it, so you have to wonder what she's getting out of it. You know, what did Dany maybe do to ruin her life or damage her situation to the point where she feels this is justified? So even though I might not personally like the changes, I think this is a fine introduction, even if the Sons of the Harpy end up... this is a fine introduction.
Conquerors always meet with resistance.
I didn't conquer them, their own people did.
I mean, yeah, but that's not really what Barristan's talking about. You have decided to take up residence in the pyramid and become queen. And as such, there's going to be resistance. I don't know. I don't know what the point of this is, other than to maybe remind the audience of how she took Meereen.
Unagon Garenigon Ponte Bevruza Mossador.
Also, this is Mosador, a former slave turned advisor who we don't really learn anything about other than he wants revenge on the masters. That's literally all there is to him.
I want him buried in the Temple of the Graces.
The Sons of the Harpy will hear that message.
Make them very angry.
Angry snakes lash out. Makes chopping off their heads that much easier.
He seems very happy at the idea of Dany provoking the Sons of the Harpy and destroying them. Also, I don't remember, so maybe the show will, but I hope we do something with that. The idea of Dany giving an unsullied soldier a super respectful burial in a place that the local citizens might deem sacred. She does that deliberately to piss off the Sons of the Harpy, but a big point of the whole Marine plot line is that this is usually how occupying forces end up ruining their relationship with the locals. Maybe former slavers aren't the only ones who would be insulted at the idea of like a foreign soldier being buried in the Temple of the Graces. If I remember right, I don't think we do anything like that, but I'll eat my words if it does happen. I do want to say, though, this is just the show being like, oh wow, Dany's putting her foot down. I don't think we're supposed to wonder if she's making a decision out of ignorance or haste that she might come to regret later. I will say I do appreciate the line, though. She says, angry snakes lash out, makes chopping off their heads that much easier.
I wanted to speak with you.
Why do you come?
I have heard they found his body in a brothel. May I ask you why?
So we have the Missandei and Grey Worm romance, which starts in season 4, I'm pretty sure. We're still in the early days, but we've already had this scene where he like kind of creeps on her while they're bathing in the river. And they shared that like an intimate conversation where she's like, oh, I'm sorry the masters did what they did to you when you were a little boy. And he's like, don't be sorry. If not, I never would have been here. I never would have killed the masters. I never would have led Dany's army. And I would have never met you. And then he apologizes for the creeping. And then she's like, oh, I'm glad you saw me. And he's like, oh, I'm glad I did too. And she had that conversation with Dany where she's like, he was totally staring. And she's like, but that's not how Unsullied work, right? Right? And then Missandei's like, I don't know. So she's had plenty of hints, basically, that the Unsullied are not reprogrammed as the Master's propaganda would have you believe. And in the books, it's a bit of a different approach where Grey Worm readily admits, like, some Unsullied still have the heart of a man and they like to be held. But the way they frame it with this scene, it almost seems like Missandei does kind of know already that that's the case. She does understand that by now. And she's really asking Grey Worm because she wants to see if he'll admit to it or if he'd be willing to talk about it or if, you know, he has similar feelings. So Grey Worm's saying, oh, I don't know. I couldn't possibly understand why an Unsullied would go there. And then her look of disappointment. I think it's him bullshitting and her realizing, like, yeah, he doesn't want to approach that.
Why would an Unsullied go to a brothel?
I do not know.
That doesn't look like someone who believes him. When she hears the I don't know, she hears, I'm not ready to talk about that shit.
Get your shield up.
It's too heavy.
If it wasn't heavy, it wouldn't stop a sword. Now, get it up.
We have Jon training new recruits. It is kind of cool to watch this off at the back of season 1 and realize that Jon is still doing the same exact shit. He's still going out of his way to make sure that everybody at the wall is as best prepared as they can be. And what better way to do that than to train with Jon Snow, who in the show is like God tier. Sorry, maybe not God tier. S tier though, for sure. But it shows that he's humble. He truly is loyal to the Watch. And we're going to have a election for the new Lord Commander now that Jeor Mormont is dead. So it's kind of important that we show off our candidates, which are pretty different than in the books, but Castle Black since the beginning has had a lot less characters in general and just less depth in general. So when it comes time for the election in the books, Sir Alliser drops out like pretty early because he's not that popular, but there are several other like pretty popular choices. Janos Slynt is one of the people running, and the big worry is that he's going to be the one to beat Jon, and because he thinks Jon is a traitor, he could have him executed. But in the show, things are shuffled around quite a bit, and Sir Alliser is actually a pretty good candidate, one of the best, and Janos Slynt is kind of just his lackey. And on top of that, instead of Jon's life being the one in danger, they kind of shift the stakes to the wildlings, where the story becomes, oh, the wildlings are going to suffer if Sir Alistair becomes the commander. And I gotta say, it works. Most of the choices made are fairly competent, considering what is different in the show. Sir Alistair is a lot more well-meaning in the show, and all of his competition from the books has kind of not existed. So I think he's a pretty sensible candidate for Lord Commander.
Try it again. Keep your shield up, or I'll ring your head like a bell.
Jon repeats the classic Starkism. It's a good spot to throw that in. And it's so tender and personal coming from Jon that, you know, even days after Ollie killed Ygritte in front of him, we see that he bears no resentment towards Ollie for it. In this season, he takes Ollie under his wing, makes him his steward, very clearly wants to groom him for greater things, but it's very in line with who Jon is. He is just so ridiculously good-natured.
Shouldn't you be training too?
I'm hardly a new recruit.
I like this joke because it's very accurate. Sam should never stop training because he's still pretty fucking bad at everything. But I also kind of hate it. Who are you even making fun of? The writers for regressing the character? Are you making fun of me for expecting Sam to give a shit? Because Sam lacking in physicality is an actual problem, and it becomes like a real serious problem at a point later in this season. I didn't need Sam to lose 100 pounds over the course of the series. I just wanted him to keep like his progress. You know, start of season 1, he's like literally useless, but end of season 4, he's found his courage, he's getting kills, he's turning down easy opportunities to stay safe and not participate in combat. But it really does feel like his story just peaks there, because going forward he never is like that useful again, and he'll joke about it, but he never does anything to address it. And it's like, yeah bro, you should be training.
These men need a firm arms. Always out. They're poachers and thieves, not soldiers.
Yeah, and Sir Alistair walks through the courtyard, grumbles to himself like Squidward. He says, man, fuck these kids. And it gives Sam an excuse to address the fact that the election is coming up. And then the Red Woman interrupts Jon's training. Now, perhaps red isn't appropriate. I don't know. I think her costume is a bit darker, but it also seems to just be like the blue filter that they use for Castle Black's visuals. Like, she looks like she could just be wearing black. I remember it being like kind of muted. I don't see any fucking red. I don't see any red at all. That's just a black dress. It looks like maybe there's some purple accents. Like, that's just a black dress. Even her fucking ruby is just pitch black.
The king wants a word.
The king wants a word. I gotta say, this is still like one of the coolest things to happen at this point in the show. To have these two storylines, like, not just intersect, but slam together. And they actually do manage to extract some potent drama out of the fact that Jon is supposed to be loyal to the realm and no particular king or faction. And then one sets up shop at the wall, starts making demands and potential deals and promises. It's a really cool setting to put Stannis in, and it's a really great way of testing Jon.
You're not cold, my lady.
Never.
We get a bit of Mel rather aggressively flirting with Jon, and she follows up on this later. We establish later that she knows enough about Ygritte to say Ygritte's catchphrase. So there's a good chance that she already knows the answer to this question. She just wants Jon to acknowledge that he's already broken his oath to the Night's Watch. Because she's going to bring that up later when she tries to seduce him. And it seems like, according to what she says, she's primarily interested in creating another shadow baby or doing some kind of leech shenanigans again. She can smell that juicy king's blood, that royal aura coming off of Jon. And a part of it too is that Melisandre, like her show counterpart, she's kind of a horn dog. The books make it pretty clear that all of her like sexual exploits, they are all like genuinely in service of the Lord of Light. She doesn't seem to actually be interested in like satisfying her own needs. But in the show, they amp it up a ton. And honestly, I think this virgin line is a pretty good example. Feels like it's more to just communicate to us that she's into Jon and that she wants to bone. They get the formalities out of the way, and then Stannis immediately launches into talking about Winterfell and the fact that the Boltons are now ruling it.
You know who rules at Winterfell now?
Who's Bolton?
The traitor who plunged a dagger in Robb Stark's heart. Don't you want to avenge him?
So just off of that, we already know Stannis wants to use Jon. He would like Jon to help him reclaim Winterfell. And Jon, of course, says, well, I would love to avenge my betrayed family, but I have taken my vows and I belong here now. This is all kind of stuff we already know, but it is important to reinforce or reestablish since we have the election coming up. Jon is somewhat of a controversial figure among the Night's Watch. He inspires great loyalty, but also great disdain, which means we're going to have a pretty dramatic election cycle for Lord Commander. And we also get a pretty clear picture of why this is an alliance that makes sense to Stannis. Jon makes pretty clear the fact that he doesn't hold any resentment towards the wildlings. And we're going to see that Stannis is pretty much of the same mind. It may not be informed by the same experiences as Jon's, of course, but he doesn't really have almost any history with them. He did show up in Clean House to help bail out the Night's Watch, but we'll find that he is more than ready and willing to even let the wildlings become like citizens of the kingdom, so long as they help him out in defeating the Boltons.
If I'm to take Winterfell, I need more men.
The men of the night.
Talking about the damn Night's Watch. Talking about the wildlings.
For all the talk about Stannis being rigid, this is yet another great example of him being very flexible and adaptable. I think in the books, Donald Noy is the one who says like Stannis is like true iron or whatever. He'll break before he'll bend. And in the show and very much the books, that is not the case. And it's funny, the spooky music frames this as like an evil or sinister plan.
They swear to follow me, I'll pardon them. We'll take Winterfell. Once the North is won, I'll declare them citizens of the realm.
But like Davos said, that's a fair offer. That's the best offer that like the wildlings could ever hope for from a king, at least right now. Being like conscripted into a foreigner's army, that's not fun. But hey, they get to go past the wall. They get to stay south where it's safe. They get their own lands. They're citizens now. I mean, think about it. You either fight at the wall and fail to get in and you die, or they let you through the wall and then you fight the Boltons, and then if you live, you get to stay.
If Mance kneels before me and swears his loyalty.
Don't think that's likely.
Stannis isn't really sure how to acquire the loyalty of the wildlings, and he kind of defaults to the Westerosi way of thinking, where he goes, well, they have a king. If the king swears fealty to me, then I get the wildlings. They're all mine.
Convince him to bend the knee, or he burns.
Shield up.
We cut to the Vale, and there's not quite as much to say without like skipping ahead. But we do start with just a hint of shenanigans going on. Peter has, in a way, secured the Vale. He's not the Lord of the Vale, but he's the Lord Protector. He's the, like, regent. And he's put a lot of work into acquiring Sansa and trying to win over the Lord's Declarant. So it's a bit weird that he takes off and he doesn't really do anything with the Vale now that he's kind of pocketed it. Even the army, I think Sansa's the one who requests the Vale shows up at the Battle of the Bastards. I don't even think Peter orders it. I think he allows it, but there's a part where this guy right here, Royce, even says like the Knights of the Vale came here for you. And they don't defend Peter at all when Arya. Sorry, we're already jumping ahead. We've jumped all the way into season 7. But point being, Peter decides in this scene, or at least announces in the scene, that he's leaving the Vale, which is a bit concerning. What could this plan be? We cut to Brienne, who's just sitting around, I think washing her sword. It's Valyrian steel, so I sure hope she's not sharpening it. And she's moving very slowly and mindlessly. She's very clearly brooding over the fact that Arya rejected her help. Understandably feeling like she has failed her oath, because she got really fucking lucky and just happened to bump into one of the Stark girls. The one who has been infamously missing for years now. I'd be a big ouchie. And she's got to be resenting Pod at least a little bit, because it was kind of his job to grab Arya while the fight was going on, and she completely slipped away. And Arya's pretty quick and crafty, and, you know, she chased cats in King's Landing and all that garbage, but Brienne, who doesn't know that, would probably be like, this is another Pod fuck up, which I don't love as a choice. They keep Pod, like, mostly sweet and lovable, but they also make him, like, kind of a bumbler, when I feel at this point, like, he wouldn't be such a bumbler. So now she's sitting around not sure what to do, because honestly, what can she do? She has no fucking clue where Sansa went. There's a kind of foreshadowing for her story in general. There's a lot of book elements that filled out her time, and pretty much all of them are gone in the show. So as a result, they have to have Brienne have these, like, wild, like, coincidental lucky meetings with the Stark girls.
You told Lord Royce we were going to...
So Sansa asks Littlefinger, hey, why'd you tell Royce we were going to the Fingers even though we're headed west? If he wanted to betray us, he would have done it already.
If he wanted to betray us, he already would have.
And he's like, yeah, I could trust Royce maybe, but I can't trust everybody else at that castle. Do you trust all the stable boys and the cooks?
But he's not alone in that castle. Do you trust all those knights and ladies, stable boys and serving girls?
And what's weird is her response is, no, do you trust the men escorting us or driving the carriage? And it's like, you asked the question.
No, do you trust the carriage driver or the knights escorting us?
don't. If you get it already, then why are you asking him? And yeah, we should also point out, Sansa has undergone a notable shift in personality. If you'll notice, Sansa's acting, like, a lot more confident and at times even disinterested. Like, she's gotten a bit more smug, and it's a bit awkward because they're kind of trying to set up, like, smart Sansa, like, oh, Sansa's becoming a player in the Game of Thrones. And while this is kind of the direction I think her character should head, especially after what she did at the end of season 4, it feels like kind of a jump, and it's also a weird jump considering what she actually gets up to in this season. She doesn't really get to play the Game of Thrones. She doesn't outwit anybody. So this is kind of lazy lip service to the idea that Sansa has learned and is growing.
So where are we going?
To a land so far from here, even Cersei Lannister can't get her hands on you.
I guess we can write this off as him bullshitting, but because he goes complete goober mode in this season, I really can't tell what is him bullshitting and what is him, like, his actual plan that's just a stupid plan. You know a place where Sansa would be really, really safe? The Vale. We could just stay in the fucking Vale. You know, after all that work, smuggling her out of the capital and, like, involving himself in Joffrey's assassination, you know, and getting her to the Vale and then killing Lysa and kind of, you know, low-key taking control, it would make a lot more sense to, you know, set up shop there, or at least to keep Sansa there. But it seems he has other ideas. And you know what? It's Littlefinger, so I'm sure they're great ideas. We return to the funeral in King's Landing, and Cersei bumps into Lancel. Given who Cersei is, it's a little weird that she left this loose end kind of completely unattended, but you do have to remember that Lancel forfeits his own life if he throws Cersei under the bus. You know, having sex with the queen, big no-no. So it makes sense for Cersei to not really worry too much about him from that angle. However, it looks like kind of worst case scenario has happened where Lancel is no longer concerned about like the same things that she is. That'll be her big problem when dealing with the Sparrows, is that they're immune to, like, her conventional methods of, like, trying to control people.
I apologize for my son's appearance. They call themselves Sparrows, bloody fanatics. They never would have come to the capital when Tywin was alive.
Right there we get a tiny hint at it. I talked about this quite a bit more in the Tywin video. If you haven't seen that, definitely go check it out. But A Feast for Crows and seasons 5 and 6 are supposed to show like the real legacy of Tywin Lannister. You know, his like whole supposed motivation was about his family name living on after he died. You know, establishing that big badass dynasty that would last thousands of years after he was gone. But we'll see that because of his reputation, because of the choices he's made, because of how he's raised his children, his legacy, his entire house just kind of gets ripped apart as soon as he's gone. And this line kind of hints at that. The idea that the Sparrows, they never would have dared to show up at the capital while Tywin was alive. Cersei leaves the hustle and bustle, and she goes to a place to be a bit more alone. And then Lancel ends up following her there because he's got some more spicy things to say to her in private.
What can I do for you?
You can forgive me. I tempted you into our unnatural relations.
And I say in private, but you can hear people talking. Lancel at least is being pretty fucking loud.
And of course, there was the king, his boar hunt, his wine.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I found peace in the light of the Seven. They watch over all of us, ready to dole out mercy or justice. Their world is at hand.
But this is I don't know. This is kind of a weird scene because this kind of conversation should have Cersei freak the fuck out. She should be getting Lancel like murdered right away. I'm pretty sure in the book she has the High Sparrow killed because she finds out that Lancel might have told him. But this conversation is largely, I think, just to remind us of what Cersei has done with Lancel, the dirt that he has on her, and to establish that might be a bit of a problem going forward.
It looks like dawn.
We got Loras in bed with Polivar? Olivar, maybe? We have Loras in bed with his squire, which I didn't love how quickly he hopped into bed with this guy after Renly. He was kind of in love with Renly, but you could be forgiven for forgetting that entirely with the way he moves on. But he's in bed with his squire now, and they're having a look-see at his birthmark, which is pretty high up on one of his legs. And they're commenting that it looks like Dorne. This will be a plot point later, and we'll talk about that when that happens. But for now, we're enjoying some pillow talk. Then they start having a steamy makeout sesh, and then Marjorie walks in and she's shocked. Not because he's gay, she's known that, but I'd like to think she's shocked because he didn't fucking lock the door.
We're late for dinner as it is. I'm afraid my brother is keeping the king waiting, Oliver.
My lady.
And he just walked out naked too? Like, they're not being careful at all.
Perhaps you might consider being a bit more discreet?
Yeah.
Why?
Fucking thank you, Marjorie. She doesn't realize how right she is, because the Sparrows are gonna become a big deal. Being gay in Westeros is still, you don't want people to know that. Most people in this setting would still call that like abominable. And Loras is gonna, here, I'll just let him say it.
They will know about me anyway. Everybody knows everything about everyone.
Which is a somewhat fair point. Especially compared to the books. Like, it's almost treated as knowledge, like just as fact, that Renly and Loras were gay for each other. Which it's weird that that's like super public, but at the same time, you wouldn't want to make that worse. You wouldn't want to pile on more evidence. But it's still something that impacts, or at least should impact, Loras's life. Especially in this version of events, because in the books he goes to the Kingsguard. Whereas in this, he would ideally be, still kind of a player in the game. Back to Illyrio's abandoned mansion. We got Tyrion drinking. He's finally got a fresh change of clothes. He's still brooding, still not feeling great.
You never told me why you set me free.
Your brother asked me to.
It's quite an answer. I'm not even sure why Varys would think that would satisfy Tyrion.
Would have said no.
Refuse the Kingslayer, a dangerous proposition.
Not as dangerous as releasing me. You risked your life, your position, everything. Why?
What a great question. The big fish eat the little fish, but I keep on paddling. His whole MO being about, I have to keep myself in the game because I'm the only one, like, doing right by the people. He threw all that away and joined Tyrion across the Narrow Sea. I will say in the books he does have to go into hiding because Jaime does make him release Tyrion. Varys stays behind. He shows up in the fucking walls. It's a really cool moment because it's like, oh shit, he never left. Or maybe he did, but he can sneak back in at a moment's notice. He doesn't lose everything. Whereas in this version of events, Varys kind of loses his network. He loses his influence. He abandons all the work he did in Westeros and just says, fuck it, it's time to go to Essos and get Dany over here.
You risked your life, your position, everything. Why? You're not family. You owe me nothing.
And yeah, of course, Tyrion sees right through it, which prompts Varys to restate what we've known to be his motivation for much of the show.
I didn't do it for you. I did it for the Seven Kingdoms.
So Varys helped out Tyrion because he thinks that Tyrion genuinely has a future as someone who will, like, influence Westeros.
You have your father's instincts for politics, and you have compassion.
Compassion.
Again, go watch the Tywin video. I think it's really funny to say that Tyrion has his father's instincts for politics, and then to say he has compassion when Tywin's political instincts were anything but compassionate. They were kind of antithetical to anything resembling compassion. And it's also funny because Tyrion wasn't that great of a politician, and neither was Tywin, but everyone thinks they're fucking mad dog geniuses. Especially in the books, Tyrion is like way more effective in like combat situations, funnily enough, than he is like political maneuvering. But putting aside, you know, our brains, what they're trying to tell us is that Tyrion is smart and he's capable and he could be a really good politician, and that he should put his skills to use by serving Dany. This is the sales pitch to Tyrion from Varys for Daenerys Targaryen.
A ruler loved by millions with a powerful army and the right family name. You can ride with me to Meereen, meet Daenerys Targaryen, and decide if the world is worth fighting for.
And Tyrion agrees to travel with Varys to meet Dany, but as indicated by this line, he's still not fully convinced, or even convinced at all, that this will be a worthwhile endeavor. If anything, he just has nothing better to do. Which I do like. Like I said before, it makes sense for him to be really sad and bummed out and feel like nothing matters. But I do think that there should be a bit more anger. And it would make sense if maybe we were just holding off for the anger, if he was just kind of going through the different stages. I think he kind of neutrals out, I want to say before like the halfway point of even this season. We kind of got a glimpse at like Tyrion's more vengeful side coming out in that episode of The Laws of Gods and Men, where he says like, I saved this whole city, like I saved your worthless lives. I wish I had enough poison for the pack of you right now. I didn't kill Joffrey, but I would have done it. Like that's such a fun moment where Tyrion's been used and abused and he's being put through this kangaroo court, and he finally just lets loose all the fury that he has bottled up. In the books, we continue down that revenge path. Like he's not entirely sure what he wants to do, but he kind of sets down the path of like destroying Westeros and ending his family, and at one point even making a deal with Illyrio, I think, that if he helps Aegon usurp the Lannisters, he gets to do some crazy shit to his sister. Probably, at least for the show, probably a better choice to not have him go as insane. But we really got robbed because we get none of that. And I think even for show Tyrion, it would have made sense for him to have kind of a more villainous arc where he wants to get justice for all the bullshit that he's had to endure.
Our mission to Yunkai was a resounding success. The wise masters of Yunkai have agreed to cede power to a council of elders. All matters of consequence will be brought to you for review.
I hate to do it again, but in the books, everything is a lot more complicated, and Dany has to work a bit harder. In the books, as Dany goes around like doing these crazy good deeds and like liberating people, when she leaves, like things usually descend pretty quickly back into how they were, if not worse. And Yunkai is an example where she loses control of that city after liberating it. But here in the show, she sends Dario to clean it up, and he comes back and he's like, we did it. It's taken care of. Yunkai has a little government now that will report to you. No, it exacerbates what I think is probably the biggest issue with Dany as a character for probably the entire show, where you watch all these characters, male and female, struggle and fight and get put through the fucking ringer. At least the ones you're supposed to root for. The villains are allowed a lot more luxury, but our heroes have to work for every little victory that they can get. Whereas Dany, after season 1, she just, so much of the work is done for her. And so many of her difficult choices don't feel that difficult because so much of the nuance gets sucked out of it because the story has to be streamlined. I think this is a pretty good example where we have what was a much more complicated issue being solved by just Dany telling people where to go and what to do, which is just, I don't know, it's a lot less satisfying than a lot of the other journeys going on.
They did ask for some concessions.
Concessions?
Politics is the art of compromise, Your Grace.
I'm not a politician.
Like, this is kind of what I'm talking about. she, like, the slightest, like, you're telling me there were complications? You had to compromise with people? It's like, yes, Dany. Have you learned nothing? You cannot liberate a foreign city and just expect everything to fall in line with how you envision it going. You cannot have that city fall out of your control and then send people to clean up the mess and then be fucking surprised and indignant when they come back and say, yeah, compromises had to be made.
I don't expect the Wise Masters to be happy. I ended slavery.
They do not ask for the return of slavery. They ask for the reopening of the fighting pits.
Note too that it's a request. It's not even a demand. But yes, we approach the issue of the fighting pits, which obviously inhumane, barbaric, terrible, not okay. But it's a bit more complicated than that. And this is one of the few areas where we get to keep a bit of the nuance. We actually have to contend with the fact that, yeah, in this setting, the fighting pits might actually be beneficial. Which we'll get more into it.
Free men would fight free men. The pit fighters you liberated plead for this opportunity.
That's a weird fucking moment. It almost seems like it's obvious what it means. Daario whips out the knife as Hizdahr is saying something Dany finds offensive. It seems like he's asking, you want me to drop this guy right now? You want me to kill him for saying that? But he pulls it out when Hizdahr says, yeah, it would be free men fighting free men. And even if he's just a little delayed and he's pulling it out because he's suggested reopening the fighting pits, it's really weird because in a later scene in this episode, he tells Dany that he thinks it's a good idea. I don't know why he's so trigger happy right now. Is he just hardcore white knighting? Like, oh, are you upset, my lady? Should I dispatch this man for you?
Opening them would show the people of Yunkai and Meereen that you respect their traditions.
I do not respect the tradition of human cockfighting.
And I like that. That's what I want. That's what I want to see. Dany coming at the situation from a pretty righteous point of view, saying like, no, this is just objectively fucked up. This is so wrong. How could I allow it? But she's in a really tricky situation, and over time she's going to realize that it might be a good idea to make some concessions. Progress is fucking great, but you cannot force it overnight because you won't be able to maintain it. I mean, it kind of sucks to say that off of the back of Yunkai being cleaned up easily and off screen. But this is where Dany's story is the strongest, when it's exploring, her having to make these really difficult decisions and there not being a clear answer. That's why I wish we followed up the decision to have that Unsullied buried in the Temple of the Graces. Because that's another decision that makes sense coming from Dany, and in a way it's like the right thing to do. It's justice for that soldier. But that well-intended action could have farther-reaching consequences, and it could ultimately end up being a bad choice. Because Dany's responsibility isn't to satisfy her own, needs for justice. It's to do the most good she can for the most people under her rule. And the moral math required for decisions like that, it's a lot more complicated. So it's a lot more fun to watch her parse it out.
You should reopen the fighting pits. My mother was a whore. I told you that. So they sold me to a man in Tolos who trained fighters for the pits. I had my first match when I was 16. I'm only here because of those pits. I learned to fight like a Dothraki screamer, a Norvoshi priest, a Westerosi knight. I made so much money for my master. He set me free when he died.
And his reasoning is something. But I wouldn't say it's great, because his argument is, I learned to fight in the fighting pits, I became famous there, I earned a ton of money, it's a good opportunity, potentially, for slaves. The problem is, it's fights to the death in the fighting pits. A bunch of slaves have to brutally die in combat for the amusement of other people, so that the survivors can get the glory. How many slaves did Daario have to kill to make a name for himself and become free? And it's annoying because I have to say all this because Dany doesn't say any of it. She just kind of is like, oh wow, that's crazy. I didn't think about that. And then we kind of awkwardly transition into talking about dragons. He says, everyone's too afraid to speak truth to you, but not me. You need to show your strength here and now. You have so many enemies. They're waiting to see weakness. She's like, I am showing strength, which I guess this is what I mean. I don't know what he means by you need to show your strength now. They were talking about the fighting pits. Does he mean that opening the pits is a sign of strength? And no, apparently he's just talking about some other shit now.
I expect you'll be a better ruler than the fools sitting on the Iron Throne the last 100 years, but I'll never serve him.
Those are pretty high marks coming from someone that you've defeated, especially a wildling who is a very anti-Southern king. And yet Mance says, I'll never serve him. It's not a question.
You brought them together to save them because none of them has survived the winter, not if they're north of the wall. Isn't their survival more important than your pride?
Fuck my pride. This isn't about that.
Then bend the knee and save your people.
Does the king beyond the wall, the man who's represented and united the wildlings for quite a while now, does he abandon their most fundamental principle in order to get them across the wall? Or does he give his life to show that even when a southern king has come all the way to the wall itself, that even when that king has offered him everything he wants and is threatening his life, is threatening to burn him alive, Mance will still not kneel, because that's who he is, that's who his people are, and that's a principle he believes in. He wants to see that principle survive passing through the wall. And yeah, Stannis says, oh, I just want to use them to fight the Boltons for now. Once the wildling army has agreed to fight for Stannis, I think Mance knows, like, yeah, he's just going to keep using them. That's how feudalism works. You only really keep people under, like, your umbrella of protection so long as they're serving a use to you. And typically that's war, that's armies, that's bodies. And in the case of wildlings, that's all that is. Stannis sees them purely as a fighting force. So I don't think Mance wants to set the precedent that, yeah, wildlings will cave immediately. Just like any southerner, they'll kneel if it means their lives. Mance really doesn't want Stannis thinking that about his people, because it only means that he'll try to exploit them further.
They followed me because they respected me, because they believed in me. The moment I kneel for a southern king, that's all gone.
And how many...
There's a slightly line. Yeah, the wildlings respect him and they believe in him, but they're also wildlings. Most of them are following him. And he said this earlier in the show, most of them are following him because he convinced them that the White Walkers are going to kill all of them if they don't get south of the wall. The one partially accurate thing about it is, this is Mance pointing out, like, I'm not the king of the wall. They follow me because we don't kneel and I embody their principles. If I kneel, like, I'm betraying their principles and they don't follow me anymore. Notice how he said he would never serve Stannis. I don't know if Mance ever says, like, his people serve him. It's always, they follow me.
And you won't go out and rescue them because why? You're afraid of looking afraid.
Jon doesn't quite seem to get it. Mance already said, fuck my pride, that's not what this is about. But Jon doubles down. He's like, no, it is about your pride. You're afraid of looking afraid. And Mance proves him wrong instantly.
Oh, I am afraid. No shame in that.
It's not a matter of pride. This is a matter of Mance's goals conflicting with his principles. And I think he has enough faith in Jon and his people that in a way he knows this is him passing the buck to, like, Jon and Tormund. And I guess the one kind of frustrating thing is that Mance should probably just say that at some point. He should have said, this is an offer you give to my people. This isn't a choice I get to make for all of them. This show kind of avoids that, and instead it just focuses on, oh, this is a principle that Mance is willing to die for.
I don't want people to remember me like that, scorched and screaming. But it's better than betraying everything I believe.
And that's it. That's the whole enchilada right there. You can absolutely disagree with him, as Jon does, and you can argue it's selfish. He has an opportunity to save lives, and that's the fundamental disagreement he has with Jon. Jon is truly worried mostly about saving as many lives as possible.
He'd rather burn than kneel, a great hero, and they'll sing songs about you until winter comes, and the White Walkers come for us all, and there's no one left to sing.
But Mance, he says, what's the point of me living if I abandon what I believe in the most? Am I really truly saving my people if I have to ask them to compromise their most fundamental principles in the process?
I think you're making a terrible mistake.
The freedom to make my own mistakes was all I ever wanted.
We cut straight into Mance's execution. Stannis tells him to bend the knee and he will be shown mercy, and Mance says,
This was my home for many years.
maybe I'm a dummy. Someone in the comments is gonna have to tell me why he says that. I honestly, I don't really get it. I'm not sure why he chooses to say this in his last moments, but he follows it up with this line.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come.
And he has accepted his fate. And Stannis gives him a little look of respect, and then he says, all right, do it. They tie him up, they start burning him. Melisandre starts doing her usual song and dance. One kind of weird thing is that Shireen is here and she's watching. You'd think Stannis wouldn't be cool with that, but I like too that Mance tries to put on a brave face, but obviously when your flesh starts to burn, that's a bit impossible for most people. And I do like that he says he doesn't want people to remember him like that, charred and screaming. But he doesn't get a single scream out before Jon shoots him with an arrow and gives him a mercy kill. But he gets to live just long enough to register that he's been shot and to look at Jon, and then, have some gratitude before passing. And there's not exactly a consequence for Jon making that choice, but it does get followed up on. Stannis in the next episode will be like, it was brave, and I don't punish men for bravery, I reward them. But yeah, that was the first episode of Season 5. Already off to a pretty bumpy start. But like I said, there's some good to be found in this season. And hopefully, if you decided to click on the video, you get some type of enjoyment out of hearing me make fun of the bad and appreciate what good we can find. Thank you all for sticking around. Hope you enjoyed. Really appreciate you for listening the whole way through. And with that, I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.